There have been waves of disruptive technology over history. This time it's going to happen very quickly. 5 years, maybe 7 max, before we're going to see wide-scale disruption of job functions across the board in every developed country. Americans are already up to the gills in debt. Many of them are living paycheck to paycheck. I wanted to start something to put a number on the American dream, what it costs and what it takes to achieve it. Here are your realistic options. Politicians have been talking about this forever. Work hard and you'll make it. The reality is that the goalposts have changed.
Neil, you have great perspective on what's happening right now with AI, with the market, with jobs. Would you mind just sharing a little bit about your background and what makes you an interesting guest for the podcast?
No pressure.
No pressure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan. So I'm Scottish, I'm blunt.
Beautiful.
Maybe that's what makes me an interesting speaker. We'll find out. Came over here about 25, 26 years ago to go to business school. And since then, I've spent my last 25 years of career in Silicon Valley working for tech companies as diverse as PayPal, Scale AI, Cohere AI, and a voice AI company called Play AI. And some consulting at McKinsey and BCG as well. So it's been a sort of journey from hardcore engineering all the way through to entrepreneurship, more recently through AI. And we actually met through my son.
That's right.
Is 22 years old just now, and he worked for Dan as a junior SDR for a few weeks as he was being onboarded. He's working with Glean AI, which is fantastic, and having a good time too, by the way.
Yeah, he's actually crushing it. So shout out to Alex.
Very proud of him. Proud dad. So I've been working in AI for about 4 or 5 years. I'm now starting up my company called American Dream Index to put a number on the American dream and what it costs and what it takes to achieve it based on where you live, what you do for a living, and whether those salaries and costs are compatible. And essentially, I'm looking at AI as a massive accelerant towards some of the challenges that we have in society around inequality. It's going to put the benefit again towards capital versus labor. And this time it's going to happen very quickly. So I'm glad that I'm on this podcast. I wanted to share some of my perspectives, given I'm an amateur historian, economist, and engineer now.
Having some historical context for what's happening, the pace of what's happening is really important because so many people, your son included, are experiencing this pace of change and it's their new normal, or it's their normal. It's not new. It's just how they are living life. But for us who started out, 15 years ago in the professional world, for others who started 30 years ago, the pace of change is just ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And you've got some really interesting data points you've been doing some research on and just, being in the world a little bit longer and paying attention a little bit longer than some other folks. I'm not calling him old. I'm calling him wise.
Okay.
So I'd love for you to share just a little bit about where are we in this moment right now? How does it compare to 2000 to 1990 to 1980? And why is that important to have that context?
Yeah. Well, the reality is that there have been waves of disruptive change through technology over history. The wheel way back when, then the steam engine, the gasoline engine, nuclear power, solar power, and more recently, mobile communications, the internet, etc. And all of these things have fundamentally changed not only how society performs, but also our economy. And generally, it's been for the better. There's always a disruptive phase where farmers have to move and they have to get a job in the city and it's miserable for a little while, or at least for one generation. And that has happened time and time again. It's not new, and you can read the history books about what happened and what the social impact of these changes were. I was actually there for .com V1, so I actually started up a company back about 25 years ago that was also capitalizing on some of the changes that the internet created. And there were huge changes there in retail and other industries that were completely transformed by the new technology. Now, it's getting increasingly hard for society to figure out what the implications of these changes are. I would say that if you go back far enough and you look at inventions like the steam engine, it's relatively obvious early on that it's going to transform transportation and allow more things to be sold more widely than before, and anyone with a horse expecting to make money out of that's going to struggle. The AI revolution really started when ChatGPT came out this particular version of the AI revolution about 3 years ago. And we still don't quite know what's going to change. It is getting also a lot harder to figure out what this means for all of us, other than we know it's going to be very pervasive And this time around, it's going to affect white collar jobs more than blue collar jobs. And this may be the first time that that's happened at large scale. And so that's partly why we're talking just now, and partly why I think there's a lot to learn and a lot to be wary of going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for us, trying to help people think through this change, trying to make this period of trepidation, of turbulence, a little bit easier to
Yeah.
deal with, but recognizing that, your role, your industry, your company, your sector is going to be disrupted, I think is really important to get ahead of things. Where do you feel like the biggest disruptions are going to happen in the next 6 to 12 months?
I think in the next 6 to 12 months, we're still in a bit of a learn and figure it out phase. But I have good data on a few areas and a few industries that are being transformed very quickly. So the legal industry, the LLMs are becoming much better and much more accurate at understanding briefs and being able to prepare parts of what would typically be a more junior lawyer's role. That's happening quickly. The accuracy of these models is going up very quickly. It used to be figuring out which order a sentence should be in, etc. Simple stuff. Now the models are all chasing after frontier knowledge from PhDs, lawyers, architects, and others. And it's much higher value added stuff that we're going after. Another industry that is being disrupted, and I was actually at a CMO dinner about 2 nights ago, is marketing. Marketing, especially in tech, is very complicated. There's a lot of data that you can collect from your users and their behavior. There's a lot of different channels you can use, etc. And right now, there is a huge impetus to using AI to massively automate those processes to free up resources to do other things. I heard examples, and this is obviously a frontier example, where there's a $60 million multi-channel digital campaign being run by less than one person just now, 60 million a year. And if you went back about 10 years, that would probably, with that amount of budget, take like 6 or 7 people plus parts of an agency to do. And admittedly, this is best class, one person. Every single
That's
CMO at
wild.
this dinner was talking about how they're being expected to do much more with much less. And
Mm-hmm.
this is all going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years. Getting into marketing, if you don't have really strong AI chops where you can prove that you can use these new tools, you are not getting in.
So, all right, let's take that example a little bit further. So, we've got this very expensive campaign that they're running, expecting to get great ROI out of it. There used to be 10 people, now there's one person running it. What is AI automating? What are the low level tasks, or maybe they're high level tasks? What is being automated that you don't need those other 9 people?
Yeah, it basically AI happens to have found a sweet spot in marketing where you don't need truly deterministic results. In other words, there's still going to be a human in the loop to check that the creative is correct. There's still
Right.
occasionally going to be a human in the loop to look at the analytics and make sure something isn't going off the rails. But the day-to-day process stuff, updating creative, changing your channel mix strategy, spending more money on some ads and optimizing your campaign around that, and even managing and like interpreting the instrumentation, that is now all largely being done by AI for the truly frontier companies doing this. So the overall idea of the campaign and the structure and the sort of big picture, it still requires a human. It's the day-to-day monitoring that typically required more junior or mid-level staff to interpret that has been largely automated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of checks out with what other guests have said is that, when AI is applied the right way, and this could be in a lot of different fields, but it's the human who is coming up with the strategy, the overall execution, the orchestration, but the like day-to-day tasks, the next level, like once the strategy is in place and AI can really run with it.
So, Neil, within marketing specifically, let's say there's somebody who is just starting out in their career, someone who's mid-career, and someone who is an executive.
Yeah.
What are some specific pieces of advice that you would give them on what types of things they should be learning up on?
Yeah. I mean, essentially across the board, you need to be good in quotations about AI. If you're an executive, you need to know where AI works and where it doesn't, and you need to be pushing your team rigorously to start trying and testing some of these new ways of using AI to automate things. It's not just about cost saving. It's really about freeing the team up from the handle turning tasks that aren't exciting that AI can handle. That means you have more brain power to do more creative, more value added things. But the executives need to be pushing for this. The mid-levels need to be able to use this stuff themselves. The era of lots of managers managing lots of things may be changing quickly. You may end up being a manager of agents that are not human, but are doing things according to your instructions. So you need to understand where a human is needed and where an agent is required. And you need to figure out how to use these tools yourself, because otherwise you're not going to be credible as you grow the more junior staff. For the junior staff, it's a mixed bag. If you can get in at a job, then great. But if you come with a bag of tricks, like I use, for example, N8N to create agents that automate a lot of things. I use that to talk to Airtable and all these other things that have actually been around for a little while. And you can basically prove that you're capable of leveraging multiple AI resources. So when they hire you, they're not really hiring one person. They're hiring one person that can actually manage the work of 2 or 3 other people through automation. Then you're golden. But there are not going to be so many jobs. And there are honestly not so many of these young people out there that are capable of this. Every single CMO I talk to is describing the pain that they're going through and how hard it is to learn some of this new stuff because of the volume of different things you could learn, and you cannot do it all.
Yeah. So you said that your son is 22. I assume he went to college, knowing you.
Yeah.
So when he was in college, were there any courses that he could have taken on this stuff?
People came up with courses fairly quickly, but they were fairly shallow. Now the courses are starting to specialize into verticals for marketing, for sales ops, for other things. That's really where you have to go, because at the end of the day, you're using AI for a specific job function or functions, and they're starting to exist. Often they're run by vendors, and that's okay. In all honesty, just take the training, learn it.
Right.
But there really has not been much good stuff until probably the last year or so. And also this is moving so quickly. Anything that was published more than 12 months ago is obsolete. It's that simple.
Yeah.
You have to update it faster than that.
Yeah, I mean, how do universities keep up? And it's strange, early on in these discussions, I thought a liberal arts education was the best way to go because that can help you think and critically reason and be adaptable. But if you want to get in marketing, you can't just be good at communicating.
Right.
You have to be pretty technical, it sounds like, at least from what you're hearing.
I think this is what's going to change the fastest. There is no world in which not knowing some technology and being able to use these agents is not going to get you ahead. You may be able to find a job if you graduate in something that is not technical, but that's never going to be high paying compared to the technical job, the more technical jobs that require higher levels of skills. So it's almost like you need an and. A liberal arts degree is just fine, but you need to learn somewhere along the way how to use, for example, tools to create art or creative, and I'm just taking the marketing example, how to automate processes, even if you don't have a job, learn how to use these tools. So when your resume lands on somebody's desk, you actually have like, hey, I can do this, this, and this right away. I can add value to your team, and I'm the person that can actually use these agents. That will be a differentiator. A degree alone, no chance, and it's already happening.
Yeah. And since we're talking about careers, I think it's worth noting that the best candidates that I come across are always people that go beyond their stated job description. So if you are already working at a tech company and they are using something, even if they're using Notion and maybe they have the AI functionality within Notion, whatever it is that you have exposure to or that other teams have exposure to, raise your hand and start thinking of ways that you can leverage that technology and create some sort of beneficial outcome for the company, because that is a story that you can put on your resume, on your LinkedIn profile, and talk about in interviews. So never feel boxed in by what you were hired for. That's really the best way to grow, is to take initiative. And a lot of times these people will go to execs and be like, hey, I'm seeing this problem. This is the solution. This is how I want to get there. And then they'll do a pilot. And then all of a sudden the next year they're running a 50-person team. And, they're really junior in their career. So, yeah.
I will say this. I am gravitating just naturally to the particular hard skills that they have. Like, okay, it used to be Excel. Now it's like, how do I use agents?
Yes.
And I'm looking for evidence of that.
Yes. And I talk endlessly about how important LinkedIn is, because the best jobs are filled by people like me and sometimes aren't even posted. And one of the biggest things I always say is like, put your tech stack up there. both in your summary, but also in your experience section, what are the tools that you're using? Because if a company is using a particular AI tool, they're going to want to hire somebody who has familiarity with that AI tool.
Exactly.
Every person at a company needs to now start being proactive about solving problems.
Yes. We talk about how is AI changing us? It's forcing us to be more creative. Yes, it means that we need to use these tools, but for you to be irreplaceable, you need to be creative about how you're using them and show your manager, your executives at your company that you're doing something that nobody else is.
Yeah. All right. So we just talked about the kind of archetype of a tech company in marketing. What other industries are you seeing are ripe for disruption?
I would say the medical space as well. And in this case, I don't see a lot of downside to AI. We have realized that the best AI models can outdiagnose your average doctor and even sometimes your average specialist, which is incredible. They're also incredibly good at doing things like note taking. Doctors hate
Right.
note taking. Often they have different systems where they have to put in several different notes. And now you can have an AI taskmaster listening in, transcribing everything, and then filling in all that stuff so the doctor doesn't waste time in it. Fantastic. Now, here's the crazy thing. You would think that doctors have more empathy. You can't replace the human element. No, they actually did a blinded test where they had basically some wall between the doctor or bot and a patient. And even the patients thought that the bots were more empathetic to their needs. So,
How
so
were they
yeah,
communicating? Like, was
it,
it
it was text. So there was no way to actually tell who was on the other side. And they
right?
sort of introduced delays and all these other things to account for that.
Interesting.
But you know
That
what?
is
In about another month or so, I'm pretty sure they could have a person who looks a lot like me, speaking with my accent and completely cloned,
True.
including all of the mannerisms. I'm fairly sure that's coming.
Yeah, even
Yeah.
robots.
I think it's already here. Just the digital presence. I
Yeah.
mean, like
Yep.
telemedicine.
Yep.
Oh my God, that opened up a huge, awesome opportunity for doctors anywhere to earn extra income. And now, like, what's going to happen to them?
Yeah.
Well, we have a big shortage of doctors and specialists. There's not enough of them. We are seeing the aging out of certain populations of specialists, etc. So in net, AI is going to be a big positive to medicine. And also, medicine's expensive. We may even
Right.
get to a point where we're forced to use AI doctors because they're cheaper, because there's no other way of supporting the large cost base we've created here. That may be a terrible thing for doctors to admit has to happen, because they're proud and they've spent a lot of time learning a lot of things at great expense, but it may be the right thing for society again, because at least people can get treatment when they otherwise couldn't afford it. It may come.
Question. Where is the primary source of profit in the medical world? I know doctors get paid a lot, especially like anesthesiologists, and I think it's going to be a while before we start letting robots do that. But like, isn't it the hospitals that are charging so much anyway? I mean, so if the hospitals are managing bots that are replacing the doctors, I don't know that that's going to necessarily drive down costs for us because they're still going to want to just,
The hospitals are just going to make more money.
yeah, and insurance companies.
I mean,
Fuckers.
we're talking about an incredibly convoluted system with
Yeah.
massive inefficiencies and red tape and lots of people scrapping over the same money. So in
Yeah.
all honesty, I don't know.
Yeah.
Other than if we did have these tools and they were cheaper, ideally people would either chase profit or find a way to reduce the cost of the services delivered. I couldn't tell you which way it's going to go.
Well, and I'm sure it'll create more competition because these private companies like One Medical
Oh,
can
yeah.
offer different things at a lower cost. So
That should
who
happen.
knows?
Yeah, you're right. There's no reason you have to go to the local hospital if you can do a very adequate telemedicine session with a specialist or something, as long as they have the labs or whatever other data they need.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I want to do one more industry because this is fascinating how much
Yeah.
you know about these different
Everything.
industries. Yeah. Seriously. Just all you do
Well,
is
his name
read.
is Neil. His dad's name was Neil, and
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
knew everything too.
You're all
So.
wicked
Very
smart.
good. I appreciate
So, one other industry that you're curious about, you've been learning about that is ripe for disruption.
it. I would say this one's a little further out, but it's coming, is manufacturing and robotics. So this has been less talked about, but certainly if you look around, you'll see it. There's a massive investment happening in robotics just now. Ironically, actually, China's miles ahead of everybody else in this. They have more
Hmm.
robots working in industrial situations in China than there are in the rest of the world put together. But I see it happening in the States. And we're talking about the ability of robots not only to do robotic things, go get this box from this shelf, shove it on this pallet and order it this way or that way, but also soft skill robots that have tactile sensors and have some sense of inertia and can do things that almost look humanoid. We're going to see that accelerate a lot, and the costs will come down. I don't think they're going to be cheap, but we will see a lot of manufacturing getting better and faster. And frankly, some of that may be driven by the political environment. We have tariffs now on a lot of imported products. Admittedly, a lot of raw materials are not going to be automated in any way. They're still raw materials, but manufacturing may see even more of a renaissance in the US than it has in the last 20 years. And by the way, manufacturing is up in the US in the last 20, 25 years. People talk about the manufacturing base going away, but the reality is it was just automated. So now when you go into a factory, there's not a lot of humans running around, but there's an awful lot of automation that costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right. So there's robots creating stuff, but not more jobs for humans.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I just read
And
about Amazon is, I mean, most of their warehouses are just robots and a
Yeah.
couple of people managing the robots. But that's more of the as you described, like picking things up, putting them on pallets, going
Yeah.
across the warehouse. But that saves a ton of time and cuts out people that would otherwise be doing it.
Yeah.
yes, and people who can get injured and cost a lot of money because of that. There's all
Yeah.
these benefits. So yes, you're going to have less people earning $23 an hour or whatever it is across a warehouse, but you're going to have fewer people that are doing things like supervising the factory, supervising the transportation, and then the people who actually make the equipment who are far better paid than your average warehouse worker. And it's been like
Hmm.
that for multiple generations of the Industrial Revolution. And people earn more money unless you're at the bottom.
So, independent of industry, you've talked about two different personas, basically the entrepreneurial persona and what you call the handle turner.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about those two?
Yes. So I'm going to go do a little bit of historical context here.
Sure.
So it was back in the 80s, 90s that NAFTA came about, and NAFTA ended up essentially eviscerating a lot of factory towns in middle America that are what we consider left behind. And some people moved and they went to a big city and got another job or whatever they did. And a bunch of people stayed, but the industry wasn't there. The towns have been in decline for essentially about 20, 30 years. We're going to see the same thing happen again, but what happens to the individuals affected depends very much on their mentality and what they're capable of. And one thing I learned actually in gaming, of all things, is that people do have certain characteristics about how they look at the world and what they do about change. So, handle turners, and by the way, I don't mean this to sound disparaging at all. There's a lot of people who want to do a good job and they want to work 9 to 5, 9 to 6, or whatever, and get promoted, go up, or earn money for their families, etc. But they're not particularly entrepreneurial. They're not going to adjust well to change, and that's by far the majority of people on the planet. And there's a number of people who I would call much more entrepreneurial. They see opportunities. They're adaptable. They're far faster at picking up new skills. And that's maybe a tiny minority of people, or a small minority of people at least. They're going to be just fine. And what's going to happen is, depending on the age of the person affected when this revolution happens, a couple of things are going to happen. The entrepreneurial ones are going to see the new technology and figure out how to make money out of it, or a new business, or automate some process and get a promotion. And the handle turners are not going to do that. And in many cases, they are going to be left behind again. So the example I give is a fictional, well, they're not fictional, they exist, 52-year-old bookkeeper somewhere in the Midwest. When AI comes for the bookkeeping jobs, and it certainly is, they're going to have real difficulty keeping their job and ever getting a salary comparable to that if eventually they get kicked out of the marketplace because AI does take their job. And there's going to be a lot of people like that. What's different this time is not just the fact that this is going after the white collar workers, and previously generations of technology did not. It's because it's going to happen so quickly. Like the Industrial Revolution took 30 plus years for steam to kind of catch on in factories. This is taking 5 years, maybe 7 max, before we're going to see wide scale disruption of job functions across the board in every developed country. And with that pace of change, a lot of people are going to get left behind and they're not going to find another job that's going to pay them the same amount of money. Americans are already up to the gills in debt. Many of them are living paycheck to paycheck. The people that are affected by this next industrial revolution are going to mightily struggle, and there is no plan that I can see anywhere for mitigating any of that. It's everyone for
Man,
themselves, and there's going to be a lot of hurt coming.
I was feeling a little bit optimistic during the beginning part of the conversation, but now I'm just in a deep depression.
Well,
It
but you're
really
one of the
is.
entrepreneurial ones. You're going to be fine.
But I just came back from a long week of travel where I was in three different airports in three different cities and seeing so many different people walk by and wondering what are they doing with their lives? How are they making money? How are they thinking about protecting themselves or investing in themselves for the future? What would you say to that 52-year-old bookkeeper in Boise? What do they do?
I don't have a great answer, Dan. I don't. I think at this point, if you're a 52-year-old bookkeeper, do your absolute best to be as competitive as possible. Learn what you can about AI, but this is a game of musical chairs. If there's, I'm making up a number here, if there's 400,000 bookkeepers across the US right now, I don't know, no idea what it really is, there's going to be 200,000 in 5 years' time, tops, maybe less. Find something else unless you're convinced that you can deliver better quality service at a lower cost. You should look to get out. There isn't a future for many of these process-oriented white-collar roles for long, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes me think about, like when you were thinking about going out on your own and building your own business, like what are we going to do? How are we going to make money? How are we thinking about what's going to make us happy? How do we use those skills that we have? I think a lot of people just need to start doing that, even if they don't want to. They
Mhm.
need
Yes.
to start planning on what are the, related industries, related jobs that I can do. Maybe I can have multiple jobs. Maybe there's going to be a generation where people have multiple sources of income. Again, it's not just you have your 9 to 5, but it's going to be a lot more sporadic. I want to pivot into the American Dream Index and why you started out on this venture and what you're most excited about kind of proving or helping people prove.
Sure. So, little context here. It's basically putting a hard number on what it takes to afford the American dream. I mean, politicians have been talking about this forever. It's like, work hard and you'll make it. Or another version of that is come to America if you're an immigrant and you'll make it. And the reality is that the goalposts have changed. The cost of home ownership, insurance, childcare, education have shot up. And salaries for the vast majority of people who are not entrepreneurs or salespeople or something where they have a very large variable compensation component, they're being left behind. And especially in high cost of living locations like New York or Seattle or San Francisco. So I'm putting a number on this. It's a consumer financial services company, a little bit like Credit Karma. We will help people figure out what it takes to afford the American dream, how to save, what the best people are doing to save, how you can mirror that kind of stuff. And also, if it comes to it, where you need to move if you can't make it in, for example, LA with a particular salary and it's never going to happen in LA. Like, what are other cities that you can move to should you decide to, where you can have a family and a yard and a 3-bedroom home, etc. So that's kind of the idea. And I think I've really hit a nerve here. I've been sitting on this idea for 10 or 12 years as I've watched inequality not get better, but get worse. So I've owned the domains for a while. And I've talked to probably about 100 people so far about this as part of my research. And people are desperate. They want a way forward. And many of them feel like they're trapped. Probably 20% of the people I talk to have got a good handle on their saving. About 80% know they got a problem and they have to do something more radical. So I think I've hit a nerve here, which is exciting for me. And I'd like to help people.
So it sounds like it's very kind of financially driven at first.
Yeah.
What about thinking about helping people find meaning in life? What does finding meaning look like? It sounds like this is your passion project. This is your way of maybe giving back, of helping bring up the bottom
Yep.
earners a little bit. But talk
Yep.
a little bit about how you're searching for meaning at this point.
Yes. This is a very typical sort of middle to end of career thing. Ultimately, the same things that excited me years ago don't excite me anymore. And there's a great book by Arthur Brooks called From Strength to Strength that goes through exactly this process, and not unique in any way at all. I've always wanted to help people, but I, for whatever reason, never really got excited about the sort of the local charities that were helping people in a, a sort of food bank or something like that. It just didn't work for me. And I realized that because I'm really kind of a data geek and nobody's done this, and I was getting steadily more and more annoyed about politicians doing the hand wavy stuff and not really curing the problem, I wanted to start something using data and using numbers to highlight the problem with hard facts and also catalyze some change. This could go either way, but if people realize that, listen, the deck is stacked against me, and my ability to afford the American dream as a nurse married to an accountant or whatever has gone down massively in, call it Chicago or Portland or whatever, I am going to be able to help people navigate where they can go. Here are your realistic options. If you're a nurse married to an accountant, I know what your career trajectory earnings typically look like. Unless you're a superstar, this is what they are. And I can basically give people hard evidence and ideas and facts and options and model them all out to tell them, if you move to, Klamath Falls in Southern Oregon, you can afford a house for $400,000 and you can retire age 63 instead of slugging it out and never getting there until you're 78.
How has AI impacted the American Dream Index? Has it made it easier to manipulate this data?
Massively. I use multiple AI tools, and one of the ones I use all the time is Claude Codes to do some Python scripts so that I can import vast amounts of data from governments and other sources, clean it up, put it on a database so it's easily accessible for the American Dream Index to use. Also, there are a number of features that we're building that are going to involve a human-ish AI agent that's going to be able to give people really good advice based on their financials, what I know about the rest of America, about its affordability, jobs, etc. And it'll give them like advice in plain English, like, here are your options, talk to me. And that was not possible 3 years ago.
That'd be so awesome. I just thinking back on the 23-year-old version of myself where I was living in Boston making more money than I had ever made, but it was actually just peanuts. And then I get a job in San Francisco making double what I was making in Boston, but my rent went up 50% and a burger was 50% more expensive. And all of a sudden I was just as poor as I was before.
Right.
And it was like,
That's why we don't live there anymore.
yeah. But if I had known that, had I gone to San Francisco, I'm very lucky.
Yeah,
and
you wouldn't have
happy.
met me.
I'm very lucky and happy that I did. But I don't know if I would have if the data was right in front of me that you're going to double your earnings and have no impact to your ability to save or buy or do anything.
Yeah. But I mean, also these life choices aren't just about how much money and getting ahead, at least in the early years. Once you have a family, you should really start thinking about this stuff. But
Yeah.
but like there's also that idea of just being around people who are thinking ahead, and that's what these cities that are expensive can offer, is all of a sudden you're bumping into people who give you an idea or make you see the world differently, and that sets you on a totally different trajectory.
Yeah.
So,
Which it did for me.
True.
yeah.
True. In many ways, you're making an investment. You're joining a very expensive country club to accelerate your career and what you know. You will
Yeah.
not find that in probably 80% of the cities in America or in any country.
Yeah.
Hopefully this isn't backtracking too much, but being like entrepreneur versus handle turner, there's got to be a handful of qualities that you see in people, that you've seen in people throughout your career who are adaptable. What would you say are the 2 or 3 things that you see in people who are going to be totally fine going through this change?
It's curiosity, number one, maybe also number two. If they're curious and they want to learn about how things work and they want to know more, they will naturally find a way to spend extra time somehow, whether it's at work or after work or whatever it is, learning some new skill and figuring out how to apply it. You can't teach people to be curious if they're not curious in the first place. So that is the number one.
So
Number two,
sorry,
go ahead.
before you go on, why can't you teach them how to be curious?
I am Dan, I have the benefit of experience. Remember you pointed that out earlier?
He's playing the card.
So I just haven't seen it develop in people. They usually show up age whatever to a job, and they pretty much have this curiosity and desire and thirst to learn, or they don't. And I think it's very difficult to teach. So really the job is to try to find the people who have that curiosity that you can just leave and they will figure out new stuff without you being there. I love those people.
Mhm.
If you have to tell people what to do and like be their brain and their creative side, they tend to be a sink of time for any manager. And ultimately, it gets frustrating for the manager and probably also the employee because they don't really have the agency that is required for a high pressure job. Now, maybe there's plenty of jobs where that doesn't matter so much, but in tech, where things move very quickly, you need the curious mind in there. Otherwise, they won't learn the new stuff, and the new stuff is coming thick and fast all the time.
Yeah.
And I would argue every company now is becoming a tech company
Yeah.
because they are more and more run by these autonomous or just, automated processes. And then agents are coming in and people are using AI. So, I mean, the companies that I talk to, from telco to construction to, healthcare, they're all tech companies. The
Hmm.
whole infrastructure of the company is built on technology. And yes, maybe, if you are a nurse, you're like in the room with another human helping them get better. But everything that got you there and then everything afterwards is tech. And all the
Yes.
Yeah.
tools you're using is tech. So yeah, I wouldn't just say you need to be curious in technology. Okay. So the second,
You need to be willing to experiment, and you need to know what works and what doesn't, and have some mental model or data to prove that you have a winner or a loser, and then move on quickly. So it's not just the curiosity; it's the speed of iteration. Like I tried something, it worked. I tried something, it didn't. Here's basically what this means. Is this going to move us forward? Yes, no, invest more if it's a yes.
that's a really interesting one. I want to unpack that a little bit because it kind of means to me like you can't have pride of authorship. When you try something and it fails, you need to be okay with that, that's a step in the right direction because you learned something that didn't work and you don't do that again. Whereas I feel like so many times if someone does something that they created and it's not good enough, I was like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. Like, no, you tried something and you're getting better and you're learning, but that's hard. That's emotional to be
Yeah.
okay with the scientific method of hypothesis and testing and failure and learning.
Yeah. And I think that comes down to culture. You need to have a company culture that deliberately supports this and says, you know what, we're going to move fast and we're going to break things, maybe, or not ideally, but we are going to move fast and there will be mistakes made along the way. And sometimes they're going to fall on somebody's shoulders, and that's okay. We're just going to move on and do it again. Making lots of mistakes and wins very quickly beats having a perfect strategy that takes a long time to execute. So just getting on with it is really important.
Yeah. So I think I interrupted you. You were going
Oh,
to jump
I
in.
was just going to say that, I mean, everything that we talk about, I think of like through the lens of being a parent and how do we inspire curiosity and how do we make them more resilient? And I feel like you are so much better at getting feedback. And I think it's because of sports. Like I did ballet. And yeah, they would correct you, but like there weren't wins and losses, and it wasn't that emotional thing. Um, but then at the same time, like I'm an entrepreneur, which is scary as shit. So
It's like the
like,
biggest wins and losses.
yeah, so I don't have
Uh,
a point here.
yeah.
Mm. You're welcome.
Yeah. Uh, so any other kind of
Yeah.
characteristics or
Last one is communications. You need to be able to communicate uh, upwards, sideways, and downwards really well, because we are now all in danger of being overwhelmed by information at work and at play. And the ability to cut through the noise and be somebody who can shrink really complex problems and opportunities into something like, this is what we're doing, this is why, this is what happened the last time. People who are able to do that are going to go really far. And I think it's easy to be overwhelmed by the complexity of a modern organization. I was talking about marketing earlier and how there's literally thousands of potential tools you can use and lots of different things you can spend your time on. Being able to prioritize and communicate what we're doing and why, super important.
Yeah. As you're talking about this, I'm also thinking about how important it is to be mindful of how you learn, because it's also very highly correlated with how are you digesting this information. And since using these LLMs, I'm starting to realize that I can't just read something and digest it. I have to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually didn't know that about myself. And I've been, I was like the nerd in school. And well, actually, I can read it if it's printed out and then I'm marking it up and then writing notes, but I can't do it on a screen.
Yeah.
And so when I'm trying to learn something through these LLMs and they're giving me an output, it's just not going through my brain at all. And so we all need to be learning all the time, and we all learn differently. So just being aware of that, I think.
I think it's so important. And I've started to recognize that in my new job at Glean is when I introduce the product to a new person, new company, I'm starting to ask them, how do you like to learn? And I get a different answer all the time. And some people like videos, some people like long videos, some people like short ones, some people like multiple ones, some people really like long documents and text, which I don't know who those people are and why they like to do that, but
Probably lawyers.
they're there.
By the way, we thought that by having computers available, people would learn all this new stuff much faster, much better, and the impact has been mixed. A good example of a company that has made it work is Duolingo. They're doing great. But if you were to look at computers in the classroom and try to tease out the impact on learning over the last 20, 30 years, it's really been quite hard.
Well, Duolingo is really using science behind that. And they're not just doing it with languages, they're branching out into math and to all these other subjects. And I was listening to a podcast where the CEO is being interviewed, and he said that public schools are adopting Duolingo left and right, but private schools are not. Because all of a sudden, why am I spending $60,000 a year to send my kid to a school where they're going to use the same app that the public school is using?
Right.
Oh,
And so it's a really interesting dynamic where these private schools, I think they're going to have to start figuring out how to make their $60,000 price tag more realistic. What are they adding that is going to be worth
community.
that when
It's who they're in person with. And
Yeah.
I was listening to Diary of a CEO, my favorite. And I'm just going to say this real quick because it was so cool. This Tuesday, 2 weeks after we launched the podcast, one of their episodes had brought 8 people to our podcast on YouTube. And because it's hard to know, are you doing the right thing here, Sarah? And that was just little dings. So anyway, I was listening to it, and it's this fascinating woman, Cody Sanchez, and she said that there was this study done of 2 identical neighborhoods, socioeconomic, education level, all these different things, except one of those neighborhoods had just a couple of really wealthy people. And after 30 years or so, the children that grew up in that neighborhood ended up having on average 30% more wealth than the other neighborhood that was otherwise completely identical. And she was saying it was because typically if you're around people, you don't even have to really be interacting with them, but if you're around people that are more wealthy, then it's basically like they have headlights in front of them that can see farther. Because if you're in a car and you're going faster, you need to be able to see down the road further.
Yeah.
And so it's that whole thing of being in San Francisco and being in New York and being in Seattle. If it's the right time in your life, might be worth it to, be going into a little bit of debt like we did because it's so expensive.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Well, hopefully things are working out for you.
Yes, we're in a better spot now, thanks to
Yeah.
Dan. I didn't understand money till I met him.
You still don't.
I still don't. No, I just give it to him.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Well, Neil, this has been awesome. It's always good to talk with you. I would love for you to leave our listeners with one thing that they need to go do right now.
It's going to have to be a Venn diagram intersection of passion and need. I can't tell anyone here to go learn AI unless they want to learn something that's interesting to them. Having said that, do go learn AI. So think hard about where you are in your life. What do you need for the next stage of your life? And whether you're 22 or 52, there is no way AI is not going to touch you in the next few years if it hasn't already. And for many of us, it's going to hit us at work. Go find something you care about that you want to learn and figure out how to learn an AI tool that helps you do that thing or learn that topic better. And you will be exposed to more of a rabbit hole. But if it's of interest to you, you'll go down that rabbit hole and you'll learn something, and you will be more valuable as a person, as an employee, and you'll feel relevant in a world that's changing around you. Do that. And not hard, but it has to match your passion.
Yeah, it's great advice.
Yeah. That sounds like it's hard to do. What am I good at? What do I like to do? That's so real right now. Find something you care about.
Yeah.
I like it.
Cool.
Well, Neil, thank you so much.
Total pleasure. Thank you so much for having me as well.
And where can people find the American Dream Index?
Just go to theamericandreamindex.com. It'll be right
There we
there.
go.
It's getting changed all the time, and it's going to help you out.
Awesome.
Love it.
Thanks, Neil.
Thanks so much, Neil.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Promptly Speaking. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating, writing a review, sharing it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss out on new episodes. And we want to hear from you. Send your questions, comments, and favorite AI use cases to hello@promptlyspeakingpod.com. See you next week.